Okay.
Hello, and welcome to Heilman and Haver, the Stage and Screen Podcast, coming to you from the Bainbridge Ballet Studio in beautiful Bainbridge Island, Washington. I'm Greg Heilman.
And I'm Matt Haver. We're two local actors looking to hone our craft by exploring the best in local theater and on the big screen. Each week we'll bring you entertainment news and views, celebrate classic Hollywood, enjoy cocktails with a Tinseltown twist, and interview talented local actors and directors.
Today we welcome to the show local artist, dancer, choreographer, Bainbridge Performing Arts instructor, and admin of the Kitsap Theater Artists Facebook page, Scott Breitbarth.
Scott Breitbarth is a local filmmaker, editor, videographer, stage director, choreographer, and Bainbridge Island's arts educator. He grew up as a Kitsap theater kid and dance student, laying the foundation for Kitsap County Musical Theater's student choreographers before pursuing and graduating with a film and TV degree from the infamous USC School of Cinematic Arts in 2015. Scott always likes to stay busy, as some of his friends say, maybe a little too busy. A few of his projects in the last year include Ovation's production of Bye-Bye Birdie, director, co-choreographer, and projections, Bainbridge Ballet's 2019 production of the Nutcracker, director, co-choreographer, and projections, again, and is editor of the Edge Improv's Letters from Isolation series. He just wrapped the final cut of the Seattle Men's Chorus Holiday Special, and he hopes to one day make a big film and actually have the time to watch it before it's released. Scott, good luck with that, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, guys. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you.
Yeah.
So, you grew up a Kitsap theater kid, as it says in your bio. So what age did you get bitten by the theater bug?
I would say I started watching a lot of musical theater movies. I guess they're called musicals then. I started watching a lot of musicals probably when I was around 3 or 4. My mom made me watch a lot of Fred and Ginger movies when my brother was in the hospital at a young age. And I ended up also watching my cousin Barbie do the Nutcracker back in Illinois growing up. So I moved to Washington and then Paulsbo probably when I was around 7 or 8. And I said, Mom, I wanted to dance. So we shopped around at a couple different studios and eventually ended up at Bainbridge Dance Center. After a few years, there were a couple collaborations between Susan Thompson and Stephen Fogel that I got to do as a young kid, primarily the magic flutes. I was a rat, still am. And I think that was doing that show at Bainbridge Performing Arts is when I said, you know what, take the next step. There's some opportunities, some doors open here. So yeah, I think that's probably a good start.
So you studied at the University of Southern California, majoring in film and television production, and then with a minor in dance.
Yes.
So what led you to USC specifically, and tell us about that experience and why it's the notorious USC.
Yes. So it kind of falls along with my theater bug. I eventually ended up, after BPA, I went to Kitsap County Musical Theater, and I started choreographing a couple numbers here and there for the shows at the beginning of high school. And then eventually, when I was 16, I choreographed West Side Story for them. And having zero confidence in my own creativity, I just said, you know what? I want to do the Jerome Robbins choreography. So I just watched the movie over and over again, and I began to realize that it wasn't just the dance moves that enhanced everything. It actually was the way everything was shot. Angles, camera movements, editing. He literally blew the budget on the film in production and post-production that they kicked him off. And you know what? It went back and won several Oscars, so I guess he was doing something right. Lots of different effects were originated in that film. And I got so caught up in the history of it that I said, you know what? Maybe looking more into film is something worth checking out. So I went ahead and looked at the top film schools because I'm an overachiever sometimes. That was one of those times. And I said, okay, USC, NYU, Chapman. I don't want to go to the East Coast. Let's check out Southern California. And luckily for me, they really look at a lot before they really figure out who is the best student. They really want to make sure that they have people coming from a variety of backgrounds. And I mean, on my end, it really was the creative resume. And I think primarily my dance and choreography background that made them take a second look at me. So yeah, I asked them probably around my junior year, what do you want me to do? I don't really have any film experience. I'm probably not going to have any time for it. Like, should I take really hard classes? Should I do more theater? And they said, you know what? Take the hardest classes you can and do what you always love to do, and we'll see where you are from there. And that's pretty much what I did. Took maybe 10 AP classes, and luckily I got in.
Did you find that their willingness to work with you
Yes.
was something that was attractive as a school? Obviously, it was on your radar to begin with, but when you write to them and they actually come back and say, hey, you want to be here, but you're here, you need to do X, Y, and Z.
I mean, absolutely, and I think that's a big thing that USC and a lot of the best universities really try to do, because they want to make sure that the people who are there really feel like they belong there and they have a good reputation and idea of what the school is going in, because then they can go in and take advantage of what they have to offer, all the classes, all the clubs, and really feel like you can actually feel like you are becoming who you are thanks to the branding. And I mean, it really was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, and then after graduation, you're representing them.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They want to make sure that you're the kind of person that can go through the coursework and their program and represent them well.
Precisely.
After graduation.
And happy to do that.
And there's been a few big names that have come out of USC. We were talking off, we were prepping for this segment, and you said that sometimes the fact that USC is on the resume, people will take a second look at the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
It's not a guarantor of any doors opening, but it doesn't hurt. But there's been some pretty big name folks that have come out of USC. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, we have George Lucas. You know what he did. Robert Zemeckis, Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, recently The Witches, if you like that movie. I did. And then Ron Howard. Just a lot of really famous TV and film legends have come from that school, and it's probably given it the reputation that it had. Probably the most famous person who didn't graduate from that school is Steven Spielberg, who tried again, I think it was around 3 times, while still working at Universal as an intern, an assistant editor. And eventually he got the last laugh, and now, he has half the school named after him on one side of the building. So, you know what?
Got some honorary degrees.
Yes, even when you don't get in, people still want to be a part of USC, and I wholly encourage it.
Were there any folks of notoriety that you interacted with, or anyone come to speak while you were there?
Yeah, I got to meet quite a few people. Bryan Cranston came in for a Breaking Bad webinar and, I guess, class, and I really enjoyed listening to him. I got to ask him a question. It was nice. My favorite professor there is Drew Casper. He just retired last year. Amazing critical studies professor, and that's probably where I spent most of my time taking a lot of his classes. Every 2 years he has a Hitchcock class, and he actually has Hitchcock's granddaughter come in, or his daughter, and they get to get questions asked from the audience. He also does a director's study, so Steven Spielberg came in, Martin Scorsese came in while I was there, and I got to ask them questions. It was really, really cool.
Wow.
Most important person that I met was Victoria Alonso. So I took there's a critical studies class that's called just Business of Film, and they actually go step by step through the process of making a film while also interviewing people who work on a certain movie. And the movie that I got to study was Guardians of the Galaxy. So they had the person who worked on development, creative. They had the actual animators come in from 2 different studios. They had Kevin Feige come in, James Gunn. But Victoria Alonso was the executive producer. She's been the exec producer on every Marvel movie since Iron Man. And funnily enough, I got to tell her where I was from, and she actually said, you know what? I used to be a waitress as the Azteca in Paulsbo when I was in school.
Are you kidding?
Wow, small world.
Big time.
No kidding. And I made a connection there. And actually, about a week later, she asked me if I wanted to be a sound assistant on Avengers: Age of Ultron. That's where I got this. I did not end up doing the movie. I probably waited a couple of days, and I said, you know what? If there's anything I've learned from doing school, is that, you kind of have to make your own roads. Your connections are going to be the ones that you make when people really want to work with you. And I said, you know what? I kind of want to be a trailblazer out where there really is no opportunity, because I've just, as someone who's really creative and has really had to go from nothing and build things into something, I said, you know what better place to do it than, where everybody already knows your name.
Right.
So I came back and been here ever since.
Awesome. So dance being probably your primary area of focus, question on that. So when I was watching Hamilton the other night,
Yeah.
as one does, and from a musical perspective, I know that the use of rap and jazz and classical kind of musical theater styles help tell the story, help build context and build out the characters and things like that. Can you do the same with dance, with different dance styles to help direct the story or provide context or some other way of moving it along that you couldn't without maybe the dance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the great things about Hamilton is that it is a satire. It's critiquing a founding father's story from rags to riches, while also juxtaposing, the story of a person of color going from rags to riches. And that's why the hip hop and the style works so well in that context, because you're really watching two different shows at the same time. And I think a lot of people like it when they can do that. Off the top of my head, a really good old example would probably be something like The Producers. Mel Brooks was not making fun of the Holocaust or the Nazis and the awful things they did. He was simply making fun of the theatricality. It was the best way to bring down Hitler, was to say you literally had to act like this for people to believe you. And actually making the connections between what Hitler was doing and American theatricality, I think, was really interesting for a lot of people to watch. And hey, he got the screenplay Oscar for it. On my end, I can think of two things. Bye-Bye Birdie, another comedic show. Downstairs in the basement where we have the Shriners Club, Rosie does a tango dance, and she's doing it with men who do not want to be touched, let alone see a woman in the room with them, and it eventually turns into a full-out orgy. If you're an adult, you get it. If you're a kid, you're like, oh, okay, guys are making funny voices. And actually, recently with this production, we're actually doing a modern Nutcracker this year. So our march actually is hip hop. So it's the famous song goes, ba ba da da ba 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 ba. We got a little hip hop remix going on, and it really establishes everybody, hey, we're in here in the modern era. This is what people would probably do if they were doing a march in a modern Nutcracker party situation. And it's all happening on Zoom. So yeah, not only the choreography, but the technology. That's just the great thing about the arts, is that really any sort of style is a vehicle, and you just have to know when to use it so that people are like, okay, it's like food. This is sour, this is sweet, it's also spicy. It's just the right combination is always going to work.
Awesome.
So you specialize in tap dance.
Yes.
And instruct in multiple locations here in Bainbridge Island. Now, certain dance styles, tap, perfect example, seem to be not a lost art, but something that fewer and fewer people are known for in modern life. Now, obviously, styles come and go. Like you just mentioned, hip hop is the way you're doing your modern production of the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
But how do you introduce these styles to especially younger folks and get them excited about it when they maybe haven't seen it? Or examples of it in pop culture and in modern film?
Well, there's always the question of why is this here? It's the great question that you ask anybody when you're learning any subject, right? Why do we have fingernails? Why does the United States, as big as it is today? I mean, history, science, it all goes back. And I think the important thing to do when you're teaching a kid about the arts is say, hey, did you ever wonder why why ballet has been lasting for 400 years, and why a lot of people say everything comes from ballet. And I think teaching musical theater and teaching tap, it really is a lesson in not only dance history but also American history. I mean, tap really comes from two different things. It really comes from the melting pot of New York, where you had the low African dance coming in with Irish dancing, a lot of hard heel, a lot of clicking, a lot of shuffling, and all that kind of combined together to this very loose style. So when I get kids involved, I say, you have to know the history of how dance has evolved over the ages, and also be able to watch the movies where they actually happen. So I literally just teach them, usually step for step, the actual choreography from famous movies that they might have seen, or might even seen before they might have seen as the movie that made them think, hey, I want to try musical theater or dance. So, a few numbers I can think of are Singing in the Rain. I usually teach them All I Do Is Dream of You. I've occasionally taught the actual Singing in the Rain tap choreography. I need to brush up on that a little bit, maybe shuffle on that a little bit. I also teach the opening to chorus line. What better show to say, hey, these are the literal twists and turns that you're going to experience auditioning for a dance show. The first day they do it, they just kind of sit down and go, what? And I say, yeah, so if you want to do this, you might want to take a few more dance classes. Coincidence, I teach dance.
I know a guy.
Yeah, very local, very close by. Yeah, and then I think the most important thing that you really can do as a teacher, but especially in the arts, is just make sure that you always have a positive, outgoing attitude, because doing this is really hard. People, I think, especially when you're young, you expect that you're going to be going all the way to the top, and if you don't have the right amount of interaction with the right kind of people, you're going to be thinking that it's going to be a straight road. It really isn't. Some people take years, even decades, to get to New York or one of the top stages. And I think that really when you're telling a student this and you're getting them used to the idea of, like, this is how much of a workload it is actually being a professional. These are what professionals that have family have on you. These are what professionals with money have on you. You have to say, you know what, from where you're starting right here in little old Kitsap County, you got a little bit of work to do. And the earlier you start it, and the more you get used to the pain and the blood and the sweat and the tears and the constant frustration with yourself, the more you're going to wake up at the beginning of the next day and be like, you know what? That was yesterday. This is today. I'm going to keep going because tomorrow belongs to me.
So how does something like Dancing with the Stars, what's your feeling on that? Is it one of those that, from the dance community, that getting dance out there, regardless of the medium, is a good thing? Or the format of something like Dancing in the Stars, where they're trying to inject it into pop culture, is it a good thing, a bad thing? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, it all just depends on the quality of the product, I think. And I mean, that's what Dancing with the Stars is. If you're going to make something on big screen television or big screen TV, it's not going to be about who's the best dancer, who has the best show. It's always going to be about who can cut a deal. And I mean, if you're going to be trying to get people to get more interested in dance, then, what better way of saying that, hey, we have all these amazing dancers. Here's some people that you might know, and they actually might be good at something. It's good at something new. It's basically kind of like the opposite of meeting that person that seems quite ordinary, but they have an amazing skill. It's like, here's people who are already somebodies, and they're going to have some fun, and we get to laugh at them along the way and see who comes out. I think there's kind of like an aura of that around any sort of movie or show where you don't expect people to be able to dance, and sometimes they prove you wrong. I mean, I think most shows that people think about when they think about recent musicals will probably be The Artist or La La Land or Greatest Showman. I think as long as people do a great job with the choreo and the work is there, then it's something that is going to be respected, in the next 10, 20 years. Those are the musicals and shows that we are emulating, that we are commemorating by exploring these different kinds of dances. So yeah, if you're going to do something like that in any regard, whether it's a musical or a stage production, just make sure that you have people who either know what they're doing or that you have enough time and money to make sure that they do know.
Well, the nice thing is, in a show like that, in Dancing with the Stars, I know they show you what they work on week over week, so you see how hard it is, and B, you see that it's you get an appreciation for the skill that's involved.
Mm-hmm. I mean, can you imagine what Hell's Kitchen would be like if they had Hugh Jackman on there? Gordon Ramsay yelling in his face. You call yourself Australian, your lamb is frickin'.
Well, and it's
one day.
A show like that, it also is impressive and surprising. The people that you think will automatically be awesome.
Yeah.
Say maybe movie stars who've had the opportunity to do a show with dancing, or an athlete. You think,
exactly.
And they triple over themselves. And along those same lines, people who started out, famous actors, Christopher Walken. Who started out as song and dance man. I picked up a book recently from my favorite used bookstore, the Kingston Bookery, just actually down the road here. And the owner says, "Did you know that James Cagney, the book I'm holding, did you know James Cagney started out as a song and dance man?" And I'm thinking White Heat, I'm thinking, and
G-Men.
Yeah, and Walken too.
Yeah.
They go on to play these roles, and you go, seriously? Right. And then you see Walken in something like Fat Boy Slim's music video, and you go, do they superimpose his head on somebody else's body? Are there any other stars that came from that background that that would maybe surprise people to know that they have that classical training?
Definitely. The young man who plays Spider-Man right now, what's his name again?
Holland.
Tom Holland. He was one of the original Billy Elliots.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I mean, if you ever want to do a dance movie with somebody, I mean, that's your guy. I just cannot wait for someone to actually tap into that. I mean, that's probably why it was so easy for him to play Peter Parker, because with that mask on, he can still be physical, he can still act, he can still move. I think that would definitely be the top person on the top of my head. Maybe we'll actually have Sean Johnson come back from Dancing with the Stars and do a movie. Who knows?
Well, first off, shout outs to two of my favorite films earlier, La La Land and The Artist. the artist, I thought was just a cinematic treat when we saw that. Segueing into your work as a producer in both film and stage, I think there's some obvious differences, the
Yes.
camera between the two. But what do you find as, contrasting the two, producing for stage and film? Some of the maybe challenges that might be unique to one or the other, or some of the commonalities?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just the time difference. I think that movies, it's kind of like a process I call the big crunch. So a film, you pretty much know that you have usually one shot. Unless you got a lot of money, you pretty much have one shot to get something done one day. And you could spend months and even years planning out your whole 72, 90-day shoot that you're going to be doing. And you will be literally sleeping probably 4 hours a week, worried about how that shot's going to go and hoping that you get it right. Theater, you get to continually rehearse it, and then you get to do it on stage. I think that I'm going to back up a little bit, actually. 1 second. Absolutely. So I kind of call this like the big crunch. Film, you have to really cram all your time into one space. You can spend weeks, years, decades figuring out what your product is, and then just know that it has to work at this moment, at this right time. Ask anybody who tried to shoot something during the eclipse a few years ago. I think stage, you do get more chances. Basically, however you rehearse it, you're going to be doing that from start to finish. You're not going to have to stop. You're just going to be like, okay, lights come up, I do my scene, I do my dance, I come right back off. A movie like this, the kids today definitely learn, 4 to 8 minutes of choreography turns into 4 to 5 hours of shooting, especially if you're trying to get the right angles down and make sure that everyone knows their stuff and they get to do it right the first time or the second time, not the 5th or 6th time when they're doing closing night. That's probably the biggest thing I can think of.
Yeah, I guess between when you're shooting film inside, maybe more similar to stage in that, but when you're filming outside, you're looking at light from the angle of the sun, how it hits off buildings, things like that maybe you only get a window of a few minutes that you need to get the shot that you have envisioned. Whereas inside, maybe you're creating those things in a stage.
Exactly. I mean, that's the biggest obstacle I'm still facing with my feature film that I have yet to finish, Prey, which I made with the amazing Cordell and a couple other friends. Steven Silver's amazing composer. I shot during the summer, and I quickly realized that because I live in Washington, the sun goes away probably around September or October. So I literally had to wait a year to shoot pickups from a point of view and then keep going. Maybe one day I'll be able to 3D generate an entire Washington rainforest, but in the meantime, you do kind of have to depend on the sun. And here, you get to play God. You get to make anything from anywhere as long as you just have the right amount of lights and people who are willing to put up with you for a few hours.
So taking a couple steps back, during high school, you were influential in launching the Kitsap Children's Musical Theater, and you're still very active with youth. You're as an ex-director at BPA, here at Bainbridge Ballet, also at Ovation.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about some of the challenges working with kids and their expectations, but what advice do you have for someone who's maybe considering taking lessons for this first time, or maybe a child who's maybe worked down at WWCA in a theater production and wants to transition into a musical where there's dancing and more elements involved, or maybe even studying it and pursuing a career eventually? You have some tips?
Yeah, I'd say the number one thing is just make sure that you are doing it for the right reasons. I think people often do, especially theater or film, because they think that by being in front of a camera and being awesome, that they will be able to fill some hole that they have inside. I think that you have to do something because you feel like you're actually fulfilling yourself and you're actually fulfilling other people. I found that the biggest thing that I learned coming back from school was that I felt a heck of a lot more doing things behind the scenes and supporting other people and making sure that they felt like they were putting something on and which in turn made the audience feel like they were enjoying something and getting to forget about the world for a second, that you pretty much end up realizing that, making people happy or making people feel something should be really the only goal of actually being an actor or a director. You're trying to be a communicator. You're not trying to be a megaphone for yourself.
A storyteller.
Exactly.
I think that's what attracts us all to film and theater and audiobooks. I mean,
Yes.
that type of entertainment is, what is
Podcasts.
the obsession? Podcast, exactly. It's the storytelling, and you spoke to it in that there are so many different roles. Many of our guests we've spoken with have started out as actors and realized, I really do love directing more.
Yeah.
That's something Greg and I have both talked about, is we really like being on stage, but how much fun would it be to be pulling the strings behind the scenes and helping others attain their own goals?
Absolutely. And the thing is that when you do work behind the scenes, you are not limiting yourself to your talent. There are always going to be incredibly talented people. That's probably the second thing I would say, that, if you think that that's just your talent that's going to get you in, they don't call it show, they call it show biz. You have to have the business side of things. You have to know how to treat people. You have to know how to treat yourself. You have to know how a production works from start to finish. And ultimately, you have to make sure that you have the endurance for it. Because once you finish one job, you could very well be on to the next one. Ask any stuntman. They are yet to get an Oscar category. And they probably are responsible for more Hollywood films coming out than anybody from the 20s up to today. Really underrated people. You have to have a heart and a passion for what you do, and make sure that you are willing to give yourself to it. Yeah.
Awesome. So, man of many hats. One of the hats that you recently put on, besides the nice Avengers hat, is the admin for the Kitsap Theater Artists Facebook page. Can you tell us a little bit how that came about?
Yeah, that was a volunteer effort. When I came back from school, I immediately started doing social media promotions for local theater. It started volunteering and actually eventually turned into a whole market that I made for myself. Started BPA, did a couple ads for Fifth Ave, and that turned into a job at Seattle Choruses, but I still continue to do things over here in Kitsap for BCT, BPA, Ovation, Jewel Box. And yeah, when Michelle passed away earlier this year, it was really, really tough not to go forward and say, I want to help. I want to make sure that what she wanted to do and what things that she did do for the community continue. So fortunately, people were like, this probably is the most logical person. And I said, well, thank you. And I just kept going.
and with COVID and none of us being able to really get together with people with the same interests, this whole theater community is a really big family. And once you get into it, that's the first thing you notice. It's everybody's got everybody's back, and
true.
it's just it's a community, and not having that that interaction with people, having the Facebook page and some of the other things and that's what we're trying to do here in a way is bring people together while we can't be together physically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced as an artist and as a person? What are you looking most forward to when things get going again?
I'm looking forward to actually being able to interact with human beings on a more regular basis. The hardest thing that hit me when COVID started was just having to teach young kids who already stare at a screen every day, trying to learn how to do dance over the computer for 3 to 4 months. I had an issue with learning that Zoom has an echo cancellation feature, which when you're teaching tap and your taps disappear after 2 or 3 hits, it's like, oh, okay, so I could have done that better. Maybe that one kid would have come back. Yeah, it's
not a glitch, it's a feature.
Exactly. The feature of isolation even provokes it. Coming your way. Thank you, Zoom. Just feeling, I think if anything, this has proven that, technology is not the equivalent of reality. The real human experience is actually being in person with somebody else. We've been around for how many hundreds of thousands of years? How long has Zoom been around? How long has computers been around? This is not natural. We have to be together at whatever, well, not literally whatever means necessary, but just always constantly working to make sure that we can get back to really being in touch with each other. I mean, that's what theater is all about. It's actually being able to witness and see real human emotions. It's the big advantage that theater's always had over film. Mm-hmm. Film is always trying to convince you that it's larger than life. Theater does not need to. You are already there. Your suspense of disbelief is suspended. You can get to see a little bit more humanity, and I'm hoping that when we finally start doing shows again, even though we'll definitely have some virtual shows here and there because everyone now has a microphone in their home, that we really get back to what makes theater so great, and it's actually being able to see ourselves and somebody else 10 feet away.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're glad that technology exists.
Yes.
Because it's better than nothing.
It is true.
But it's certainly not something that takes the place of that human interaction.
Exactly.
That's why
It's diet humanity.
I'm stealing that one.
Good.
Well, thank you, Scott. We've learned a
course.
lot.
Yeah, thanks,
Pleasure.
Scott. Man of many hats and doing a really good job wearing all of them. When we come back, you're going to stick around. We're going to talk about one of the projects that you're working on currently here at the ballet studio, and we're going to mix a drink and talk about some of the things that COVID has brought about, some of virtual theater, and see where that maybe is taking us in the future. So all that, we come back on Heilman Haver.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And welcome back to Heilman and Haver. I'm Haver, this is Heilman, and we've got our guest here, Scott Breitbarth. Thanks again for joining us, Scott.
Thank you, Matt.
And now it's time for a segment that we like to call In the Mix, where our resident mixologist, Mr. Heilman, will be preparing a special cocktail today in honor of a holiday classic of the stage, a show coming soon in a very special format to Bainbridge Ballet, choreographed by our guest again, Scott, the Nutcracker. Now, I assume the cocktail contains neither sugar plums, toy soldiers, giant mice, etc. So, Greg, what is in this delicious Christmas concoction we have?
Well, you're
here?
right, Matt. None of the above. So
I'm glad.
we're looking at almond milk, hazelnut liqueur, Frangelico. Some of you may know that brand. Cake vodka, which was a fun find that we had to look at a few places.
Yeah,
to,
we did
to
our
get.
homework on that one.
Topped with whipped
Nice.
cream and some ground nutmeg. So, without further ado, the Nutcracker.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That tastes like Christmas. We're going to do the rest of the show with milk mustaches.
Greg, I am
Exactly.
shaking vigorously. This is so good.
Indeed. So for those of our followers out there, listen. Woo, that nutmeg got me.
Usually does.
So for those who are tuning in on YouTube and viewing this, you'll see that we're here on a set, on a stage. We've got our green draperies behind us.
Yeah, the floor is kind of hidden back there.
Yeah, so Scott, tell us a little bit about this. So you're bringing the Nutcracker in a very special format coming from Bainbridge Ballet. You guys have been doing a lot of work. So what's all this about?
Yeah, so we, like any other small business, we pretty much came at this with the approach that, you know what, if we want to stick around and survive the pandemic, we have to still have a show. So we fully came in with the intention of, like, you know what, we'll do something like the New York City Ballet movie starring Macaulay Culkin from 1993. We'll do the stage version and we'll just shoot it very well. And then we started looking into, you know, what theaters would be available and how much it would cost. And I said, well, here's the thing, you know, what if something happens? Like, you know, people decide that they don't want to go on stage and be around 20 people with their masks off for a day. And, you know, we didn't know where we're going to be in November. So I said, well, hey, you know, being the video graduate and the green screen graduate, you know, why don't we take that money that we would usually put into renting an actual facility and, you know, just make our own. Have a lot more control over it. It's a heck of a lot more work on me, but you know what? I think I'm up for the challenge, and I'm sure there's a great way we could orchestrate this. And that turned from doing just like a back drape, a wall, just with each of our different settings, like the forest and the Candyland, to why don't we just do what Robert Rodriguez does? You know, we could do our own Sin City, our own Shark Boy and Lava Girl, and you know what, have some really fun, cheesy effects, and you know, really make it feel like an actual community production. It has a lot of heart and a lot of character. It's not about the most amazing Nutcracker Four Realms Disney style show in the world. It's about, you know, a bunch of people putting on the best thing that they can do while waiting for all this to relax. And yeah, I just began editing and full steam ahead the next 6 weeks, guys. I'm gonna need a lot more of this, so I'm gonna take this with me.
Well, we'll have the recipe up on our Facebook page and post it on the podcast. So
I'm
you
super
can-
excited.
you can check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So with COVID, obviously it's you know facilitated a lot of changes and adaptations. So to do something in person, which really is a rarity, these days with everything going on, everything's virtual.
Yes.
Doing something in person, how are you doing it so that everybody stays safe? Making sure you've got the COVID precautions in place, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Bainbridge Ballet has been on top of COVID guidelines since day one. So we basically treat ourselves like a gym. There's a couple other things that I probably would not be very good at explaining, and that my director would be much better at. But long story short, masks on, 6 feet apart, ventilation, wide open spaces. If you're in Studio B, make sure you take the other entrance. There's like a little door that goes down with the stairwell, and just constantly making sure that you play the honor game. And if you don't feel so good, just stay at home, please. And you know what? We only had like one scare where 2 kids came in and tested positive later. No cases that happened within the studio, and you know what? People stayed at home if they wanted to, and we just kept rolling, and we're still fine. What we are doing, it works, and we apply the same thing over here. Open ventilation, everything when we can. The biggest thing that we had to do was, number one, make sure we could understand what people were feeling very safe doing. So our party scene, which we shot 2 weeks ago, we had enough people in that scene where that pretty much said, okay, we don't really feel comfortable not wearing masks. So for the whole party scene, we actually made it just part of the story that they actually made these fun Christmas style masks and wore them while everyone else was on call on the Zoom scene. The only people who weren't wearing masks during that were Clara and Fritz. And those were only very 2 specific scenes anyway, that kind of just in the context of reality, they probably wouldn't be wearing masks. And those kids have amazing parents, and they are very much on top of their game. I literally had to email our Fritz because he will not take emails from his mom. Like, they are on top of their health and everything. And if there's any other moment where they said we were not comfortable doing this, and I don't feel comfortable doing this, we would have just stopped. And that's kind of been the attitude with everybody. I think the only time we ever take masks off is usually when we do our actual performance, and the kids aren't really doing any other activities anyway, so their exposure has been very low. Most kids are doing school from home anyway. And again, it's just playing the honor system, making sure we talk with parents that they're comfortable. We have a specific set of guidelines that we've been following, and release forms that we've put out so people understand the responsibility of that. And overall, the biggest thing I've done is just made sure that if there's any sort of close contact, that people are either completely wearing masks or they are constantly working with each other on top of things. Our Sugar Plum and our Nutcracker are not going to be wearing masks. They're actually teachers and guest artists. But some other dances, we will be. Snow, which has probably 10 to 12 young ladies in it, on this little stage, they'll be wearing lace masks. I think we'll be wearing masks for flowers. We are still discussing that, how we're going to approach that physically. And then I think probably the last thing we do is just if we have any opportunity to split things up and keep our dances small, we do that. If we have an even number of people, half of them perform, the other half wait, the other half perform, half of them wait. Just lots of details I could go into on this.
So what I'm hearing is the show must go on, and where there's a will, there's definitely a way. Now here's a question. Now, you said that you're kind of treating this like a gym. Now, you see athletes out there training in resistance masks.
Yes.
Wearing masks. Now, does it does it improve the performance of the dancers? Have you seen that this aerobic activity they're doing?
Well, speaking as someone who even spends one day teaching from like 3 o'clock to 8:30 at night, I can tell you that I've kind of felt like one of those soldiers from Nepal that fought in World War II. They dealt with the high altitude and lack of oxygen, and all of a sudden, they were able just to be more vigorous and more athletic when they had things on. I mean, I had to keep it on the whole time, honestly, but I think like the first 2 months were tough, and after that, it was like, yeah, keep it going. Maybe I'm just getting in better shape. Who knows? But I feel pretty good.
Well, it sounds like that your cast and their support, their families are understanding. And you know what? I think that your audiences will be too.
I sure hope so. I mean, our parents are the life and blood of what we do. Our kids, it's literally what we do, who we do it for, and you know what? They need to be doing something in as safe an environment as possible. we'll be responsible for that, and we'll just make sure that have fun along the way.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So where can people see it? Is there any information posted on how to do
Yeah,
it?
so we're figuring out the details of that right now. We're hoping for a premiere the week of December 15th. It's going to be a Vimeo link. We're probably going to create some sort of PayPal system where you prepay for a ticket, and that gets your email into the mail list for when the link goes live. And we're hoping that maybe we have performances that not only happen on Pacific time but also Eastern Central time. For the first time, if you cannot see your granddaughter's production of the Nutcracker because you live in Connecticut, this year you can. And the best part is you will have some pretty wacky effects along the way.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to kind of the topic we wanted to discuss. When Matt and I were sitting around thinking about, we really miss being on the stage, doing kind of the theater thing.
Mm-hmm.
How can we do something to work with, maybe some of our former castmates and just do something to keep this going while everybody's kind of quarantined. And we've done a couple of read-throughs. We did a Zoom read-through of Glengarry Glen Ross.
Mm-hmm.
We did War of the Worlds.
Good.
We've noticed some other people are out there doing very similar things. As part of this episode, we're interviewing Amy Knickerbocker, who's they're doing a virtual theater company, which they're doing Pygmalion in December.
Nice.
So it's we're gonna have more details on that when we speak with her. You're doing this fun and creative version of Nutcracker. What else are you seeing out there that are maybe some creative ways to keep the theater bug alive while we're all quarantined? And we want to try to get into kind of an open discussion about what we think might still be around once we go back to normal.
Right.
Right. Well, I think the first thing you have to do is, in any case, that you have to laugh at it. That's what South Park's taught us. That's what Mel Brooks has taught us. If they have any opportunity to make fun of this thing, you have to do it, and that's exactly what we're doing with this. The whole party scene, one of my wonderful friends, Matt Whitman, who is a member of the Edge Improv, he came over to play our dad, and the whole thing was about, Scott, I want to wear a mask because I'm not comfortable, but I want to make so much freaking fun of the fact that I have to do this. When people make their toasts, they start and they lean away. Husband and wife probably lived together since they got married. They go in for a hug, they say, oh, and keep going. Just the lack of intimacy, but the desire to have intimacy is the whole tug and pull of this. And I'm really hoping that comes across in our party scene. I think the other thing, too, is that you just need to apply it to modern classics. One of the unfortunately lost projects that I had to deal with now because certain publishers did not consider us, Ovation, as a professional theater company, is actually doing 12 Angry Men over Zoom. So instead of having the Sidney Lumet really compressed, uptight and personal, hot and sweaty conversation where people just want to get out of the room, we instead have people from the comfort of the home wanting to get out of the Zoom room, wanting to get out of the real jury duty when all I have to do is press end, but they can't.
Right.
And then, being able to take that minimal production design and flip it, have, their backgrounds actually be, more telling about who their characters are, where they might have come from, how they interact in certain ways. Certain objects are more likely to pop up in your home than they are in your pocket, like a knife. It just makes more sense that way. You can even have a more dramatic feel with like the ending picture being torn up. But most importantly, it would really illustrate what the internet has done to us. Rather than feeling like, there's a moment of no hard feelings, the jury's over when Henry Fonda puts on juror number 3's coat for him and helps him out the door, you just hang up. We are left cold. We are left still at the end of yet another argument on the internet. Where are we going next? There's just so much you can do when you adapt something for the stage.
Yeah.
Well, there's scenarios that are obviously being played out in real life.
Exactly.
Our first guest, Jeffrey Bassett, is a Superior Court judge in Kitsap County, and he's
Jeffrey's
having to
awesome.
go in and do, court proceedings and trials, but over Zoom. And we have people doing business meetings. We did Glengarry Glen Ross. A lot of those scenes could happen in real time.
Precisely.
With a group of salesmen. A lot of those conversations. Are there any other shows that jump to mind? Because, again, we've thought about other productions that we could do in the future and things that would lend themselves towards Zoom productions, virtual productions. What other shows, anything pop to mind that would make good Zoom fodder?
Good Zoom fodder. That's a really good question. Well, you can't do something that's too far off, because period pieces are period pieces. And at that point, if you just wanted to do a fun Zoom production of The King and I, you definitely could. I think maybe the Putnam Spelling Bee show would be a good one. You know, the bee must go on. You must continue to spell from wherever you are. Trying to think of any sort of other kids shows that I've done. I mean, there could be some imagination to doing something like Alice in Wonderland, where you have Alice kind of going through any one of those locations, and you know, as long as you give her a green screen, you can kind of show where she is, and whatever background people have interacts with that. Then yeah, you could do that as well.
Yeah, it's more about using Zoom as part of it, as part of the stage or the setting,
As a resource.
rather than just cold reading, you know, over a virtual screen.
Precisely. Well, and that's the great thing about the Seattle Choruses show that I'm editing right now, is that literally we have 10 virtual choirs where 80 to 100 men and women sang over their phones, just their one part, and we had to compile all of them together, put them all on screen together, and give them some really fun effects, while also still doing a show between Nina West in Ohio and a puppet named Holiday Harold for 40, 50 minutes. As long as you can sing, as long as you can dance, and as long as you can act, you can even create things for yourself.
Tell us a little bit more about that show, how people can tune in.
Yeah, so we will probably have a stream date for that coming up soon. We're hoping for sometime in early to mid-December, but it'll probably be through our Facebook page. We'll have a very similar setup to what's going on with the Nutcracker, but they'll have their own account going on, I'm sure. And we'll probably have opportunities to make this a fundraiser as well. Initially, we're aiming for the TV for KCTS, but it looks like, you know, plans change, things come up. So yeah, the internet it is. Looking forward to sharing more about that.
Well, and we'll make sure to stay in touch and promote those as time goes by and we get closer to the holiday season for sure.
Definitely.
So just keep in touch on that.
Yeah.
So as we hopefully in the next year-ish, you get back to a sense of normalcy, get back to live theater and the things that we really miss about not being with people. Are there any things, and I can think of a few maybe, that you think might stick around? You know, Zoom read-throughs, even if they're not, because obviously there's licensing issues with broadcasting things. So, you know, so from a private perspective, Zoom read-throughs or virtual theater presentations, things like that, I can see, you know, it opens up the theater to people who don't necessarily have the time to commit to a stage production.
Yes.
Or people that travel, if you're on business travel and you can't commit to a stage production because you're on the road, well, all of a sudden you can participate in something from Paducah.
Yes.
You know, while everybody else is out here at Bainbridge or whichever.
Or perhaps age.
Yes.
We have a lot of patrons of the arts that are elderly. We have people who want to still act into their golden years and may not feel safe or comfortable doing that in person.
Absolutely.
So some of these virtual options, I think for myself, having explored the virtual options and knowing that, again, they're not quite like the real thing, but knowing that that's an option,
Exactly.
will just add that kind of to your, you know, to your stable of things that you can go to.
Right, and I mean, it all depends on, you know, who is going to be still limited after this. I mean, it's like we were talking about earlier. You know, there's the big advantage that theater has over film and any sort of video is the fact that it is in person. And you know, that's an experience that you can't really quite take away. What's happening right in front of you is something that's connecting with you right here, rather than something that's trying to convince you that it's actually real happening right in front of you through all the effects and means. But yeah, I think if people really still want to do theater and they don't have the ability, or I mean, heck, if you want to do something that brings people together across several different areas, maybe even like a play that hasn't come out yet that is meant specifically for Zoom. We'll call it the vagina monologues of COVID. Like, it could definitely happen, and you could actually have several different crossovers that way. So by all means, if people have a demand for it and it becomes a new thing, you know what? Do it. It'd be fun.
I'm excited to see the pieces that are going to come out of this. You
Yes.
think of all these creative people who've been sitting at home and maybe not even doing virtual things like this, but have been sitting home and writing and
Yes.
creating and editing and getting ready for that, to blast that out to the world when all this blows over.
Well, one of the greatest movies that I saw from one of my own classmates, actually, that came out a couple of years ago, was called Searching. One of my classmates, Will Merrick, edited it. He spent probably like a year and a half with another editor, and it literally is about a dad trying to find his daughter, all from a Mac screen. Like every single shot, the camera, Facebook, Twitter, Google, everything, it all takes place on that screen. There was even I think there was a horror film that came out 4 or 5 years ago about basically someone killing people over Skype. Just you see their walls glitch out, and all of a sudden, just before they hang themselves, it like shuts off, and that's one person down. The genre is kind of here. It's like an evolution of found footage. I'd be really interested to see if that continues to evolve.
Yeah, you bet.
A new version of And Then There Were None. Everybody's
Yes.
Zoom window goes away.
0 friends.
And all the jokes are going to be spawned from this time period. So I just can't wait for it.
All right. Well, thanks, Scott. You're going to stick around in a little bit. We've got some lightning round questions for you.
Ooh, boy.
When we come back on Heilman and Haver, we're going to present a clip of an interview I had with Amy Knickerbocker talking about her virtual theater company and their presentation of Pygmalion coming up next month.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
All that when we come back on Heilman and Haver. Welcome back to Heilman and Haver. Earlier this week, we had the opportunity to speak with Amy Knickerbocker, president of the board of the Virtual Theater 2020 company, specifically around their production of Pygmalion, which is debuting in December of this year, and about some other things that are going on with her and during the COVID pandemic. Here's a bit of a clip of the interview. The rest of the interview, the whole interview, is up on our YouTube page, which will be linked in the show notes. Hey everyone, Matt and Greg back here. We are speaking with Amy Knickerbocker of Virtual Theater 2020, and we're going to discuss some things about what she and her group are doing to scratch the itch while we are all quarantined and trying to be creative in getting into the theater thing. So welcome, Amy. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So first off, I guess in a bit of an introduction, I guess you are part of the Knickerbocker family that if anyone has acted at all in Kitsap County, you have run into a Knickerbocker or acted with a Knickerbocker.
Probably.
So if you wouldn't mind, just a little background on how your family got started into acting in the regional theater here, and specifically some of the stuff that you've done.
Yeah. My family has been doing theater for almost as long as I can remember. We did theater at church when I was itty bitty, and then we started doing it as a whole family when I was probably about 12. We did Anne of Green Gables at a little Christian theater company called Evergreen Performers, which I believe is still around in the harbor. And then when I was in high school, we started acting with Paradise Theater in Gig Harbor during the Music Man, and our whole family was in that. My mom and dad and all my brothers and sisters, of which there are 6, and I'm the oldest of the total of 7.
Wow, that's a full house.
Yeah. So yeah, and it just became kind of like our family sport, we would do auditions together, we'd sing together at home, we'd practice together, run our lines together. It just took over our lives for most of my life pretty much. And now I have a sister who has her degree in acting, and a brother who might want to become a drama teacher, and I'm an acting teacher, so and running this virtual theater 2020. So theater is a huge part of my entire family's life.
Great.
So when COVID hit, a lot of us had shows in progress. In fact, I had a show in progress, Little Shop of Horrors, with at least 3 of your siblings, I believe, and then a sister-in-law as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys, I'm sure, were very active when all that hit, and then the subsequent shutdown. How's everybody handling that?
Oh, I mean, not super well, because it's very disappointing. Your entire life is centered around this one thing, and then all of a sudden that thing is gone completely, and it's devastating. You know, it's emotionally and uh, just creatively devastating. So, um, yeah, and I was music directing Matilda at Seastock at the time, and we were just about to open.
Oh wow.
Uh, and we had been working super hard since December. We had auditions in December, and the kids were amazing, and it was going to be such a good show. Palmer Schutzau was directing it, and she's an awesome director. I love working with her. Um, and oh, it was so disappointing
I
because some of those
bet.
kids
Yeah.
might be too old by the time we get back to,
Oof.
we'd have to recast, and oh, it's just so disappointing.
Well, I imagine so. So Matt and I had sat around and talked about, what can we do to keep, going with theater while we're not actually in theater. And we thought, well, maybe some Zoom read-throughs. We did Glengarry Glen Ross. We did War of the Worlds, and like we
Oh,
said, we've
fun.
seen other people do similar things. The Virtual Theater 2020 is intriguing because it seems like a step beyond that. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about how that started. How, is it something you just thought of kind of in the same way Matt and I were discussing these read-throughs, and you thought, how can we best, come up with something that's as close to theater without being theater? I mean, can you talk us through that?
Yeah, totally. So it was just this little idea I had. I was like, I wonder if any of my friends would want to, try to put on a show and see how it would work virtually. And so I just put some feelers out on Facebook, and a couple of my friends auditioned, and we put together The Importance of Being Earnest was our first show. And we just did 2 weeks of rehearsal, and nothing was really memorized. It was like partially memorized and partially like a reader's theater kind of. But we had costumes, and we had minimal sets in the background, and we did it live on Zoom, posted on our Facebook page. um, and it worked great. It worked way better than I thought it would. Trying to figure out how to like work inside this little box. It's very unique. But surprisingly it worked. And um I'm a very innovative person, so I really love challenges and creativity and problem solving, coming up with new ideas, new ways to do things. And so this was like the perfect challenge for me, just going, well, there's this big hole in everyone's lives right now, and I have so many friends who are just aching to get back on the stage or to create or something. And so I just wanted to help fill that gap a little bit. And I was
Great,
shocked
great.
with the result.
So in the you mentioned the audition process. Is there, because you're not you're it's mostly face things, right? Because I imagine the whole body's not on this, because when you're acting on stage, it's a whole experience. It's from head to toe. You're
Totally.
at and with Zoom and virtual things like that, it's mostly just kind of this top third, if that, of the
Yeah,
body.
mostly.
So
Yeah.
is there anything when you're doing the audition process that you're looking for specific to this kind of forum?
Um, Mostly what I'm looking for in an actor is just enthusiasm. And um, I love to see when an actor loves what they do. And so if I see that they're putting everything into an audition, whether it's perfect or not, I look for potential more than perfection in an audition. Um, and We have an awesome casting director, Cassie Post, who runs our auditions, and she's done that professionally in New York City. And she's wonderful, and she runs them so efficiently and professionally, and I could not do it without her. And I've actually only directed Ernest so far. But we had our Shakespeare showcase last month, was performed, and that was um, four different directors directing different bits of Shakespeare. And so I was minimally involved with the audition process, but I was producing for them. So Yeah, so I haven't cast anybody since Ernest, but I'm directing in January again.
All right.
Now, on the audition piece again, you explained a little bit of the differences that or the things that you look for on your end. What are you seeing on the other end as far as what people are choosing to audition with? Is it still the same types of materials and the same types of audition? You see a lot of people doing mime work with just the head and shoulders showing. Has that changed the dynamic? Because Greg's right. It's a full body thing when you're up on
Yeah.
stage and you've got a director to impress. Um, what are people bringing to the table? Anything Zoom specific?
I haven't seen anything way out there or anything totally different, but yeah, we are, people are auditioning with the same monologues and stuff that you would see in a regular audition. Um and you see a lot of creativity in how they present those monologues, but I haven't seen anything, crazy Zoom specific.
So for all those out there planning an audition, don't be afraid to bring your usual game.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. We've
Nice.
had some very committed auditioners and it's been really impressive.
It's been fun to see
Great.
what people, how they dress, just from waist
I
up.
know. Yeah.
And their backgrounds.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the first show was you had the Shakespeare thing, but then importance of being earnest. How many people were cast in that?
We had 8 people in the cast for that. It's a 9-person show, but one person was double cast in 2 different roles. And it was a perfect show that lent itself to Zoom really well, because it was a smaller cast and it's public domain, so we weren't worried about any copyright issues or anything. And so we actually adapted it and modernized it, and brought it into American lingo and everything, just to kind of, so it wasn't quite so weird having it on Zoom,
Hmm.
um, and it worked pretty well.
That's one thing I noticed, that the lack of the English accents. So that was intended to
Yes.
modernize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was set in modern day New York City.
We've chatted about that, Greg and I, because like I said, we've done Glengarry with some friends. Nate O'Gwyn joined us for that. I think he was in one of your casts. I think it was
Yeah.
in. Is that right?
He's in, his brother Jonathan was in
Or excuse
Ernest.
Jonathan, yeah.
Yeah.
Another local acting family that should be familiar to most everybody listening. It seems like there are some of those shows, like you said, that the small cast, but also scenarios that people find themselves in. Glengarry, a group of salesmen who could very easily be having the same conversations over a Zoom call as so many of us find ourselves doing
Right.
late.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about 12 Angry Men too. Because especially one of our guests, Jeffrey Bassett,
Mhm.
Superior Court judge, he's been doing the kind of Zoom testimonies and things like that. So it's something that you could easily translate into a Zoom format. So there are certain shows like that. There's certain other ones, obviously you can't, because there's either, ensembles and maybe musicals. You could do musicals by singing the songs and do some rudimentary things, but obviously you've got to have a smaller or limited cast.
Mhm.
So Pygmalion is your next show, right?
Yes.
And
Directed by
I guess
Jonathan O'Gwyn.
awesome. Yeah, Nate, I was in Rumors with Nate at WWCA. Was it last year? I don't know, time flies. But yeah, the O'Gwyn family is pretty phenomenal too. Yeah, so I think auditions happen for that in October, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that is scheduled to, oh, well, actually, before we get to that, so we have the auditions and then the rehearsal process is, how does that work? Is it, I guess you're rehearsing over Zoom, right? And it's,
Yep.
are there any challenges or any hurdles or things that maybe you didn't expect that you guys have run into with rehearsals?
So many things. um yeah, one of my actors mentioned the other day that it's just things you wouldn't think of before you tried to do it, like trying to pass an object like you're in the same room. And so one of the things that we came up with for Ernest was passing towards the camera, but passing under the camera and then taking away from under the camera. And it actually worked pretty well. But just, in the moment, looking at the script and going, how on earth are we going to do that? And any physical affection or anything, that's impossible. So coming up with different um, alternatives for how to show affection without physical touch, and just a lot of things like that that you wouldn't necessarily think of right away. When you look at the script and you're going into rehearsal, you're like, okay, how are we going to block this baby? So yeah, lots of challenges, and not the least of which is not being able to directly interact with your fellow actors. That's another thing one of the actors brought up to me after Shakespeare Showcase, is like some of them have never actually met in real life. We had people in New York and one person from England in the cast for that show. And so, we had people across the world who never would have worked together otherwise, um, getting to work together, but never getting to actually work together.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in a little bit, as far as what may, if this is the kind of format that may stick around after after COVID. But the we always hear acting is reacting, right? And is it? I imagine it's one of those things that I guess gets better with the rehearsals when you react, because if you're reacting to somebody, there's a bit more of a delay if you're not with that person, in front of that person.
Oh,
It's less of a
definitely.
natural discussion.
That's one thing we had to work on a lot in Earnest, was timing, because the timing gets way off because of the lag in the reaction time. So you have to kind of anticipate a little bit. And it's definitely strategizing about how to act in an environment where you aren't with the person because in Earnest, there's a lot of really quick back and forth where you have to just be like, one person says their line and then the next person comes right back with a really witty repartee. And that kind of speedy rhythm kind of gets lost over Zoom. So you have to really figure out ways to keep uh, the pace up. So that was a big challenge that we had in Earnest.
We've talked a lot about that, how it's not a replacement for the real thing, but boy, we're sure glad it exists. Sure glad the technology
Yeah,
is there, and
definitely.
it pales in comparison. But boy, we'd all be in a world of hurt if we didn't have the ability to do this.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and we've been talking about, and going back to what you were talking about with your cast being kind of distributed all around the world. Is this are there plans to keep this going after we get back to a sense of normalcy? And do you see this as an option for people that may be either traveling or just can't make a commitment to be on site for a show or something like that? So what are your plans, and what do you think we could see come that it's been developed as part of this whole quarantine COVID thing that might translate into something once we get out of this?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to keep it going. I think it's a really awesome way to do theater now that we've discovered it. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And um, uh, I really think that it's a cool new art form, really, and the innovation that you can do with the mixed media of doing theater on screen is really interesting. So I personally would love to keep doing it, and I think it's really a cool way to bring in people that you wouldn't be able to work with because they're far away. Um, yeah, and I definitely think that it's something I would like to keep doing. We don't have plans for that laid out as of yet, but we have discussed it, and we will probably discuss that more in the future. But we do have a full season.
Want there to be a necessity for it anymore. We don't
Exactly.
want it to be.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're talking about plans for the future. Now Pygmalion's coming up next, and then what's the rest of your guys' season looking like?
Yeah, so we have
You
a
got
season
some
through
big stuff
June.
coming up, right?
Yeah. So in January we have our one act festival. So 3 different one acts directed by 3 different directors. So some variety there. And then in March we have auditions for Tartuffe um, by Moliere, and that's going to be directed by Cassie Post. And then in May, we have auditions for an original musical that my brother and I are writing based on Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, wow.
So that's my next big
So
challenge.
we are going to try the musical thing. That's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's trying to figure out how we're going to make that happen is my next big challenge.
Awesome. So Pygmalion. When is that? When are you? I guess. It's not a live thing, right? Is it you record it and then kind of publish it out, or is it live? How is that?
No, yeah, it's performed live. Yeah,
Okay.
so we're trying to keep it as close to the real theater experience for the actors as possible. And that's kind of our goal is it's not as much catering to like a perfect performance for the audience, but catering to that need to perform in a live kind of way for the actors. So that was my goal in creating this was really to create that outlet for artists more than anything else.
Awesome. That's great. And information as far as being able to see it is up at the website.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and on our Facebook page, and we also have an Instagram page.
Okay, and we will link each of those things in our show notes so that people can get to them and
Awesome.
get more information.
And past shows are still available as well. I was just watching The Importance of Being Earnest in prep for the interview and enjoying it. So those are also available on the website.
Yes, they are, and on YouTube.
Excellent.
Awesome. So one other question I was just thinking about, you were talking about live performance and audience. No, obviously you can't get audience reaction, kind of that instant feedback. Have you gotten feedback from folks that have viewed the shows, have seen Importance of Being Earnest, and what kind of feedback was that, and what did people think of the format?
Yeah, people have been kind enough to comment on our page and on the videos and to send messages privately as well. And they've been very kind and a lot of positive response and thanking us for just using our time this way to bring theater in this time when it's not possible in other formats. So yeah, it's been overwhelmingly a positive response. And after our Shakespeare review, we had Shakespeare showcase, excuse me. We had a talk back time with the cast, and so audience members were able to ask questions during the show in the comment section of the video, and then Glenn Milligan was our MC afterwards, and he asked those questions to the cast, and they were able to answer. So we had a little bit of a um, interaction with the audience after the show, which was really, really cool. I think we'll keep doing that.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it. So we have Pygmalion coming up. We'll post the links to the YouTube page, the Instagram page, the Facebook page, and the website. I thank you, Amy, for taking the time. You are the president and artistic director.
Correct.
I got that right. All right. Virtual Theater 2020.
Yes.
And man, it sounds like you got a whole season plan of some pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it.
All right. Well, thanks for stopping by. Once again, it's Matt and Greg, Heilman and Haver, and we'll be back after this break.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thanks to Amy Knickerbocker for sitting down and speaking with us regarding her group's production of Pygmalion. When we come back on Heilman and Haver, we're going to sit down with Scott Breitbarth once again and ask him some quick lightning round questions and then wrap things up. When we come back on Heilman and Haver.
And welcome back to Heilman and Haver, and thank you again to our guest Scott Breitbarth, and also to our guest Amy Knickerbocker, and thank you to you, Greg, for this delicious cocktail, which did not last long. If you'd like to know the secret ingredients to the Nutcracker, it's going to be in the show notes, and I guarantee you're going to enjoy it all season long. So we got a few fun questions for Scott now while we wrap up the show, and the first one is they're very easy, don't worry.
Okay.
So now this is obviously as an actor,
Okay.
Or dancer, obviously. What's the last thing that you do before you step out on stage, dance out on stage, before the curtain goes up? Any rituals?
Well, it might turn into drinking this. This
Right?
is amazing. It's so good. So I think I probably started doing this when I was 17 years old. I'm actually a bit of a wrestling fan. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I deny it, sometimes I go full in. But I think right around summer 2010, I started doing the Brock Lesnar hop around, getting myself all warmed up, get all my jitters out. And then usually I'll just be watching everything from off stage, and there I go.
Are there different things, specific things, is that as the dancer versus if you're just going out and performing? Or is it just kind of the same routine regardless, just kind of get pumped up?
Yeah, I mean, like you get the blood going, and you have to get all the jitters out. I think, especially for me, I'm usually a very shy person. My students wouldn't believe that. But I think that once you just have to accept the fact that you were going out there, you get the blood going, got your brains going. It just does something to relax you. I mean, sometimes I would stretch, but I think there's just nothing as simple as just being like, you know what, going on stage is an athletic event anyway. You might as well get your body to match what your heart's doing.
All right, awesome. So if you could work with one person, alive or dead, who would you like to work with?
Oh, no.
See, this guy's so talented. He does so many things: acting, choreographing, dancing, producing, directing. There's a lot of people.
He should just clone himself. And then he'd be able to
I'm
do
sure
it
he
all.
wishes he could be in 6 or 8 places at a time. Look at this. Look at the sweat on this guy's brow.
Man, if it has to be a good one.
We sent you the show notes ahead
I
of time.
know, but it's just like maybe I'll say Barbara Steinwick. You could never go wrong with Barbara Steinwick. I'm so disappointed that we never got to see the top AFI 100 people work together. You know, have Humphrey Bogart, Barbara Steinwick, and Alfred Hitchcock make a movie. That would have been amazing. Mm-hmm. And she's so versatile. If any of my students are listening to this, you need to watch a Barbara Steinwick movie. I recommend Double Indemnity. If you're in the Christmas mood, you should watch Christmas in Connecticut. And anything you find along the way, that woman is amazingly talented.
So, if someone, and this could be Barbara Steinwick. She could be the answer to this question also.
Sure.
But if someone was going to make a film of your life, see where I'm going with this one?
Yes.
Who would you like to play you? And follow-up question to that.
Yes.
Who do you think would be cast?
Okay. Let me think. I would like to say, because we talked earlier about different people being able to do different physical things off the show. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm not exactly the dancer body type. I'm kind of stocky. I have the long arms. I'm a bit bigger. I would love to see Jonah Hill give it a shot. See Jonah Hill put on some tap shoes and do something. Maybe we can get James Corden to go along for the ride too. I'll see. And then who would I think that they probably cast? Wow. Dang.
Who do you get compared to?
Who do I get compared to? I usually get compared to a balding Orson Welles.
There are worse things.
There are worse
Especially if you're a director.
I actually, my mom does say I kind of look like Jack Black's younger brother.
Okay. Well, there is an athletic dude.
That's an amazingly athletic guy. That he fills my heart with so much hope. Hey, well, we'll just say Jack Black plays me 50 years from now.
Can't go wrong with that.
Never.
I would take that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Scott. And thanks to Bainbridge Ballet for hosting the Heilman Haver podcast this week. It's been a nice break getting out of the Casa de Quinn studios for a week and having a change of scene. Coming up on our next episode, November 27th, we welcome Doug Fall, actor, singer, director, influencer, and creator of the Augmented Actor channel on YouTube. Until then, please join the conversation on Facebook and email us with thoughts and comments at heilmanandhaver@gmail.com.
Thank you, Greg. And you can find us on iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you enjoy the show, please make sure to follow us and share the podcast with a friend or 9. Don't forget to join us November 27th. And until the footlights come up again, thank you for supporting local theater and for joining us on Heilman and Haver. I didn't go to USC, but I'm pretty sure that's...